Many books and spiritual teachers claim that the easiest way to reach enlightenment is to meditate for long periods of time, and although this would help any individual towards their spiritual goals, many of us who aren't looking for it still find our way to enlightenment through a different method: pain and suffering. As the movie begins, we see Po in his prime, not long after having defeated Tai Lung, learning Kung Fu, and befriending the Furious Five, a group in which he's admired for a large majority of his life. Po feels as though he knows who he is: a son, a friend, and the Dragon Warrior. That is until he quite literally gets hit with visions of repressed memories crumbling his reality.
You okay?
What happened?
I gotta go.
Up until this point, Po hadn't questioned where he came from. It's only when faced with his forgotten upbringing does he go seeking for answers and start asking himself, who am I? In a popular story, a teacher walking outdoors with his students points to a very large boulder and says, "Students, do you see that boulder?" The students respond with, "Yes, teacher, we see the boulder." The teacher then asks, "And is the boulder heavy?" The students respond, "Oh yes, teacher, very heavy." To which the teacher then replies, "Not if you don't pick it up." Now, if we replace the boulder in the story with suffering, Po has been unconsciously carrying a boulder throughout his life until inevitably forced to deal with its weight. But why does Po's pain have to lead to suffering? I think Master Oogway put it perfectly when he said,
"You are too concerned with what was and what will be. There's a saying, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why it is called the present."
By this, Oogway means that your past is history and shouldn't be carried around with you today. Tomorrow's a mystery, and we shouldn't try to uncover or control it. All we truly have is the present. This is precisely what so many spiritual teachings attempt to make us understand, which is the opposite of what Po does for the majority of the film. He refuses to meditate to face his past head-on, so the only other option is through great loss and pain. Eckhart Tolle, a spiritual teacher, famously achieved enlightenment not through meditation, but through great suffering, as he explains in his book, The Power of Now. So where does this leave Po? It leads to him second-guessing his every move, where, in his search for answers, he lets Shen escape after learning of his involvement with the visions. This in turn leads to his entire team leaving him behind for the remainder of the mission. Despite this, Po's desperate desire for truth steers him once more towards Shen, where he reaches his lowest point. Shen uses Po's grief and anguish against him, weaponizing his vulnerability by stating the following.
Oh, you want to know so badly. You think knowing will heal you, huh? Fill some crater in your soul. Well, here's your answer. Your parents didn't love you. But here, let me heal you.
This is Po's lowest point. Up until now, he has lost his sense of self, lost the trust of his team, and presumes he was never loved by his parents. This is where many would give up or succumb to grief and suffering. But how do we overcome pain that inevitably leads to suffering? In Buddhism, there are 4 noble truths, but for this video, let's focus on the first one. Life has inevitable suffering. Whether it's not getting something you desire, things not going your way, or even losing someone you hold dear, suffering will always occur. Now, Buddhism claims that the only end to suffering lies within the Eightfold Path, advising us to not desire anything and be content with what is. That's a little extreme when comparing it to an animated movie of talking animals, so let's look somewhere else in spirituality for the answer. Mindfulness. According to the Oxford Dictionary, mindfulness is described as a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment, while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. Mindfulness is said to be therapeutic to anyone willing to try. It stops us from fighting our emotions, whether repressed or not, and accept them as they are. It's only here, at Poe's lowest point, where he's able to accept his past, finding peace in the process. Of course, we all know what happens next. With his newly found inner peace, Poe is able to confront Shen, who, at the end of it all, seems confused as to how Poe is able to overcome his suffering.
How did you do it?
You know, you just keep your elbows up and keep the shoulders loose.
Not that. How did you find peace? I took away your parents. Everything. I scarred you for life.
Which leads to another question. Why wasn't Shen able to end his? Past and future, two sides of the same coin. The story of Shen is both tragic and heinous. Unlike Poe, Shen doesn't have unresolved trauma. His past might not be the greatest, but even from his own linear perspective, he knew to accept it. His issue rather lies in his futile attempts to control fate. Nevertheless, why do so many of us try to manipulate our future? Oh, how joyous it would be to command destiny, to have absolute choice over the dividing branches of our fate. Unfortunately, this isn't rooted in reality. Yes, we can make conscious efforts in our everyday life that can affect our future. Regardless of how tedious our attempts, destiny remains blurred. There is never an absolute. Shen's position, however, is quite unique. In the movie's universe, there are soothsayers able to modestly predict the future. Shen's prediction goes as such.
Shen's troubled parents consulted a soothsayer. She foretold that if Shen continued down this dark path, he would be defeated by a warrior of black and white.
Put differently, he had a choice. Ironically, the option Shen would take ultimately sealed his fate. Or did it? Who's to say that if Shen hadn't continued down his path after killing the pandas, that his future would have remained the same? That's the tricky part. No one knows, and we shouldn't try to either. All that is known is that living in the future, much like the past, isn't ingrained within peace. As we've discussed, any attempt to fight what is outside of our control always results in the same pain and suffering. Still, mindfulness teaches us to willingly accept what arises in our lives despite our best plans. We can and must not control our fate, which leads to the question, what can we control? To a certain extent, we can control ourselves. From how we may react to an event, or what we choose to do afterwards is well within our command. The future, as vague as it is, doesn't determine what we choose to do now. We always have a choice. That is our control. Whether we've made the right ones is a different narrative, as I'm sure that most of you watching would jump at the chance to either change something from your past or see into the future. Spirituality exists to give us another alternative. Acceptance. Acceptance to assume your past and welcome your future with open arms. Choose to greet, overcome, but never fight our fate, for who knows what beauty the future carries within its mystery. Forgive but never forget, for it's our past that has molded us into who we are today. Whether your past was extraordinary or not is irrelevant, because even if your story doesn't have a happy beginning,
but that doesn't make you who you are. It is the rest of your story. Who you choose to be.